All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Starcom Radio Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. Speaking about the Starcom Radio Network, check out my good friend Ed Till. This guy is one of the icons of radio. And he's right here on the Starcom Radio Network, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to Ed. Listen to what radio is supposed to sound like. That's the Ed Till Show, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. right here on the Starcom Radio Network, www.starcomradionetwork.com. Exonation, my guest this hour is Jalaja Bonheim. We're going to be talking about sacred ego. Now, Jalaja is the founder and director of the Institute for Circle Work, and she is one of the world's foremost experts in the use of circle gatherings as a tool for empowering women. A uniquely skilled facilitator, she has trained hundreds of female circle leaders from around the world and is internationally known for her groundbreaking work with the Israeli and Palestinian women in the Middle East. Growing up German and Jewish in post-war Germany, she has struggled to make sense of the events that had left her, the German and Jewish people in total traumatized. And just thinking about that, it's upsetting. It really is. So joining me now to share with us the sacred ego is our guest this hour, Jalaja Bonheim. And Jalaja, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. It's great having you with us tonight. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved with the circle work.
Well, Rob, I think children are a lot more sensitive than we give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And as a child, I tried to make sense of things. And I felt like human beings had to be insane. I looked around me, and sometimes I think that even today, when you turn on the news,
yep,
you think, what's wrong with us? Are we crazy or what?
I agree with you.
And that question really put me on the path that I'm on today, because I wanted to understand what is it that causes us to lead wars, to devastate the planet, to do all these things that really are not in our own best interest, and yet we do them. And so that really set me, I started off with exploring all these different spiritual traditions. And in a lot of spiritual traditions, when you ask that question, you're told, well, it's the ego. The ego, it's almost like the ego has taken the place that once the devil had.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything bad, selfish, greedy, oh, well, it's the ego. And you're supposed to get rid of it. And that never sat right with me. And I thought, I don't know anyone who has gotten rid of their ego. So if that's really what it's going to take for us to live in peace, then we're in trouble. And I realized that, calling something the ego is just slapping a label on it. And I really wanted to know what's underneath it. What is it that causes us to behave in these ways? Then when I started leading circle gatherings, it was like I had a laboratory where I could begin to see what is it that allows us to get along, and when do we not get along? What is going on here? Because I think that the same dynamics that are happening worldwide, they also exist within each one of us. So in our circles, we get to see what is it in us that trips us up, and where does it come from? And instead of just saying, oh, it's bad, we should get rid of it, we start to understand that we are conditioned in ways that go back hundreds of thousands of years. And just like, someone might have a certain habit that made sense when they were 3 years old, but it doesn't make sense anymore when they're 30. In the same way, we humans have evolved certain habits that worked for us when we were living in caves, but they don't work in the 21st century. And so what begins to happen in these circles is we bring these patterns into conscious awareness, and we begin to transform them. And it's miraculous what happens. And as you mentioned, I work with Jews and Palestinians, and I love working with them because I figure if they can get along, anyone can get along. And so for me, that's sort of the touchstone of, are we really capable of relating in a different way?
So
that's what my work is about.
So would you say that a circle is basically a method of self-realization?
Yes, I think it's a good way of describing it. People have always, when you look around the world, Native Americans, African cultures, people have always gathered in circles. It's very natural.
Sure.
And you can see everyone. There's a sense of equality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a basic format that really supports consciousness, connection, intimacy. Because, see, the place where we're having trouble is relationships. And I see a lot of people on the spiritual path, they're great if you put them in a meditation hall and they can go deep within and meditate. But when they get into relationships, all hell breaks loose. So in these circles, we are learning, what does it mean to relate skillfully? And, in my book, there's a chapter that I call Relational Education. Because I figure every child should be taught these skills. If there's one thing we're all going to need in life, it's that ability to relate well.
Yeah.
And to relate well to people who we might disagree with or who don't share our belief systems. This is something that it doesn't just come to us naturally. It's something we can learn, it can be taught, but we have to recognize the importance of it.
I agree with you 100%, but my question is, with all this handheld technology now where it's text this, text that, Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social networking opportunities that people have, are we not losing the ability to communicate?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that the whole internet, it's got this light side and it's got this shadow side.
I agree.
And, the light side is it's really connecting us as a global community. And I see that in the women I work with. They're from India, they're from Kenya, they're from all over the planet.
Right.
And they can connect. And that's a beautiful thing. And when I lead circles, we have to be there together as flesh and blood people because there are certain things that just will not happen unless you come together. So that willingness to face each other is crucial, and there's just no substitute for it.
Throughout history, the circle has been a very prominent figure and shape. For example, the Knights of the Round Table. It wasn't the Knights of the Square Table. It was the Knights of the Round Table because, like you said, King Arthur had the ability to look at all his knights. They were on an equal playing ground. He was still king, but it was one tier. Everyone was sitting around. And something else that I found out while doing research for your interview tonight Every major corporation has a round boardroom table.
That's fabulous.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
It is.
Go ahead, dear.
Yeah, I think that more and more corporations are actually bringing circle leaders in because they are recognizing that there's a different way of doing business and that it's actually more effective than the old hierarchical top-down way, which really stifles a lot of the creativity that is there. And there is this thing that is called collective intelligence. You know, we are such individualists, but you look at a flock of birds flying or a school of fish, and it's so obvious that they are connected in a way that is beyond the individual. And I see that happening in the circle. I think that the circle allows us to tap into our collective intelligence so that we gain access to a wisdom that's it's beyond what any one individual could access on their own. And I think people have always known that, and they've always used circles that way.
I agree. And let me ask you this question. You're German, and you're also Jewish. First of all, when I was reading your intro, when I think about those horrific days during World War II, I get a lump in my throat because my grandparents were from Europe, and it's a very close subject to me. And all I can say to you and anyone else listening who had any member of their family, or if they themselves went through that hell, God bless you all. How do you think growing up as a Jewish young lady in post-war Germany affected you?
Well, one thing it taught me very early, even as a child, was that I didn't fit into the boxes. You know, I couldn't say, well, I'm a German. Right. And I couldn't say, well, no, I'm on the other side, I'm a Jew, because I was both. And so I started realizing that it had to be something, it wasn't just about whether you were German or Jewish, it was something deeper within human nature. And then as I grew older and I started looking around, I realized that these horrific wars were happening all around the planet. Maybe not to that extreme degree, but they even today, you know. And when I go back to Germany today and I see this huge wave of immigrants that is just flooding into the country, you know, you see what kind of suffering we are causing each other because we do not understand ourselves and we do not know how to relate in harmonious ways.
I'm going to share with you a story that I share whenever I have the opportunity. As a young boy growing up in Montreal, Quebec, we lived in the cosmopolitan area of Montreal called Park Extension. There were Greeks, there were Jews, there were Irish, there were Pakistani, there were Indians, there were Hungarians, there were Germans, there were Italians, there were people from Saudi Arabia, Arabs. We all lived together. But you know what we also did? We learned about each other. We learned about their cultures. We learned about their beliefs. We learned about their religious philosophies. And what this did at a very early age in each and every one of us was taught us to respect each other. Understand.
Beautiful.
You know, and I thank my mother and father a lot, but I also have to thank the early school method where, you know, at Barclay School on Wiseman in Montreal in Park Extension, you know, I remember my third grade teacher, Miss Bloomfield, and it was so beautiful because we had a calendar in the classroom that she would put all the different holidays, all the different religious days of all the different ethnicities in our class. So you had 40 kids. You had 40 kids in a classroom. And then you had this calendar, And as we came closer to each one of those dates, we would learn about it. We would draw and, this and that. And then those people from those specific holidays, for example, Easter, we would bring in colored Easter eggs with kielbasa and other treats and foods that our parents would cook for that feast. And every child did the same. And I'm very fortunate to have had that in my life. And when I see all the turmoil, when I see all the bickering, when I see all the fighting, it's, in my opinion, just because of one simple thing: respect.
That's a beautiful story, and to me, that story is such a great example of what I call relational education.
Exactly.
You were being taught how to get along with people who are different, and that can actually be a source of joy and wealth rather than a bad thing. So it's a beautiful thing. But, I think we have to look. One of the things we often forget is that this way that we live today is really brand new. This way where all these different cultures are mingling and races are mingling, religions are mingling. For hundreds of thousands of years, every human being lived in a small tribe.
Yes.
And within that tribe, everyone was the same. And if you came across people of another tribe, which didn't happen all that often because a lot of these tribes were very isolated, there was an immediate sense of, this could be dangerous. And so, having lived that way for so long, we have this deep habit of us versus them thinking. And this is a good example of how something which in the childhood of our species made sense. And then, really, very suddenly in the bigger picture, we entered into this global world. And all of a sudden, all those old rules have to be thrown out the window. And so we're in a transitional period where we're just learning about a whole new way of identifying as basically as a global tribe, as a planetary tribe. Even though we still have our culture, we still have our religion, it's all beautiful. But deeper than that is that sense we are children of one small planet. The problems we face,
we should just call ourselves Earthlings. Get rid of all the other titles. If we're from one planet, make everyone equal. And we need to do this by getting rid of titles like African American, Irish American, Italian American. You're an American, for goodness sake. Up here in Canada, it's French Canadian, Anglo Canadian, and the list goes on. And no, we're Canadians. So if we can do that for countries, why can't we just call ourselves citizens of planet Earth? We're Earthlings. Get rid of the titles. Put everybody on the same par. Would that work?
I think it would work. I think we still do need to really respect the differences too. That someone, let's say, who has a certain heritage is proud of their heritage, and that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. But that Earthling identity needs to be the basic identity. And I totally agree with you there.
You've worked with Jewish, or you still do work with Jewish and Palestinian women in the Middle East. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, it's an amazing experience. When I go there, first of all, when I started working there, I realized how little I really knew and how many of my own preconceptions were being cracked. Like I remember one circle I did in the West Bank. This woman walked in. Most of the women there have a veil. But this woman walked in, and she was head to toe in black.
Right.
With just the little slits for the eyes. And all of us, because I always bring women from the United States, we all had this visceral reaction of, oh, you know, there's a sense of, who is this person? And what emerged in the course of the workshop was this woman. She was a healer. She did energy healing. She had traveled all around the planet. She was the most open-hearted, open-minded person.
Yeah.
And it really forced me to look at my own prejudices and preconceptions. And that has happened many, many times. Now, I really love working with women there because they understand that this is not just a matter of personal growth or spiritual awakening, although it is that, but for them it's a matter of life and death, because they've all lost loved ones. And so there is a real sincerity about wanting to learn a new way and recognizing that violence is not the answer. And of course, a lot of these women are mothers. You know, they want a better future for their children. And when I first went there, I was a little skeptical myself. You know, I thought, well, you know, we create this amazing energy field that is just so, it's like so loving and so intense. But is it going to work there? And not only does it work, but they are starving for it. They just are so hungry for it. It is really, you know, my own entry into all this was when I went to India, actually, and I was studying Indian temple dance. And through that practice, I learned about energy fields. And I learned about creating an energy field in a group of people that affects everyone there. And I found that whether you're working in the United States or Canada or India or wherever, everyone is affected by that energy field. Mm. So that is what I teach women too, is how do you create an energy field in a group where people feel safe, where their hearts open, where they can begin to step out of that sense of isolation and fear that they live in.
You know, when you were talking about that lady who came into your circle who had the black gown on with the black burqa and all you could see were the little slit of the eyes, and you were telling the beautiful story about she was a healer and she had so much to offer. It reminded me of a saying, never judge a book by the cover.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, but see, that is that deep, I mean, it's in all of us, that tribal instinct. If someone looks totally different than our norm, our standard, there is this visceral, oh, they must be different than me. And that's why it's so beautiful when you discover that, oh, actually, no, we are not different. Mm-hmm. We are, you know, we are brothers and sisters.
Yeah. How much blame should we give the media? Because a lot of our prejudices today are based on how the media reports the news. You know, with mainstream media, it's if it don't bleed, it don't lead. And the gorier the subject, the more advertising dollars they can get.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
You know, like when the horrific day of 9/11 came, and we watched those towers go down, and then the hunt for Osama bin Laden, and then the Islamic extremists, and now it's ISIS or ISIL.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they seem to like to poke the fire and keep the world on edge.
Well, you know, I think there's two things happening at once. I sometimes describe it as two realities.
Okay.
There is this reality where it seems like everything is getting worse, where things are getting more extreme. And they are because there's a backlash, you know. As we are stepping out of an old way of being into this new planetary way of being, there's a big backlash of people who are hanging on to the old. But at the same time, there is really this amazing change happening, and I see it everywhere, and you're right, it is not going to make the news. But I see millions of people waking up. I see millions of people opening their minds to whole new ways of understanding life and understanding reality. And that is happening too. And it's just as strong, although it is far more invisible. You know, and I think if I did not do the work that I do, I would probably be profoundly depressed about the state of the world. But because I get to see what people are really like, and the courage is just astounding, and the wisdom, and these are just ordinary people. So that really gives me a lot of hope.
You know, I've been doing this show for 24 years, and I know there is hope for this world because I have the pleasure of speaking to people like you each and every night. And when I hear the passion, when I hear the love that you have for people and what you are doing, my dear, this world will get better.
I think it will. And, you know, I mean, for me, it was my own healing because I grew up really ashamed almost of being a human being. You know, I would think, well, elephants don't do this.
Yeah.
Tigers don't. What is it about us? And today, I really am in a place where I can say, I love human beings. We are amazing. We are amazing. And we are going through, I think of it as a death and rebirth. And that is never easy. And there is a lot of old that has to die for the new to emerge. And, you know, it can be very painful. It is not easy.
That's right.
But I think it's happening. It has to happen.
I agree with you, except I look at it as a child. The society is like a child going through puberty. You want to be old, you know, you want to be older than you are, but when you start realizing that you're getting there, you start getting afraid, and then you start spreading your wings, your cocky walk. And I believe that once we get past the stage, we will fall into that world of unity, that world of oneness that so many like yourself have the vision to see.
Yeah. And, you know, it's so interesting when you look at science and physics, which 100 years ago was very much opposed to religion and spirituality.
Yep.
And now, when you look at what they are finding, it's exactly what the ancient Buddhist teachers were talking about. I mean, it completely goes against our separate, isolationist way of seeing things. I mean, they tell us everything is interconnected. There is no separateness. And they tell us that our senses only perceive less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum that is out there. In other words, 99% of what is really there we cannot see. And I think all these discoveries are really beginning to open people's minds and help them understand that there is so much more than this small way of seeing the world that we have been brought up with.
You know, not only are their minds opening, but in my humble opinion, more importantly, is their heart is opening. And we're able to be more forgiving. We're able to be more respectful.
Yeah.
You know, so...
Yeah. You know, in my book, I tell this little story about the psychologist Jung, who in the 1930s came to the United States, and he had this meeting with a Pueblo chief that had an enormous impact on him. And the Pueblo chief said to Jung, we think that the white people are completely insane. And Jung said, what makes you think that? And the Pueblo chief said, well, first of all, they're so unhappy. They're always running about, trying to find something, and we don't know what it is that they're looking for. And then he said, but what really makes us feel like they are insane is that they say they think with their heads. And Jung said, yes, what do you think with? And the Pueblo chief said, well, of course, we think with our heart.
Exactly.
And to him, it was a clear sign of insanity that these people were so disconnected from their hearts. And I see in my circles this tremendous yearning and the tremendous joy, because what we do really is we come home to our heart.
Jalaja, please stand by. You and I have to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Yes.
Exo Nation, my guest this hour is Jalaja Bonheim. We're going to be back talking to her about her book, which is entitled The Sacred Ego, Making Peace with Ourselves and Our World. My name is Rob McConnell. This is The X Zone. And by the way, the websites for this book are sacredego.com and www.instituteforcirclework.org. I'll be back on the other side of this very short break. Don't go away.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus on Amazon, October 1st, and then wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. The Carl O. Helvey Holistic Cancer Foundation is a new nonprofit foundation that focuses on a holistic approach to cancer that includes physical, mental, spiritual, and political aspects. Cancer education, research, and care are provided for all types of cancer patients. You can listen to interviews with cancer doctors and survivors and read research on holistic aspects of cancer at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com. That's www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Welcome back, everyone. Just a programming note, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is coming to the X-Zone Broadcast Network. The Science of Magic is a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information, check out The Science of Magic at www.thescienceofmagic.net. My guest this hour is Jalaja Bonheim. We're talking about her new book that is entitled The Sacred Ego, Making Peace with Ourselves and Our World. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a great pleasure talking to you. This is a very important topic, and it's one that has to be spread. What can we do? What can individuals do, in your opinion, based on the circle work that you've done with women in Israel and Palestine? What can we do to make this work? How can we get involved? Not only women, but men get involved in the circles that make these differences.
Well, first of all, I think that everyone should experience a good circle.
Right.
You know, a lot of people are a little scared of it. They think maybe it's something kind of weird, or actually, so many people, when they actually come to a circle, and I do work with men as well as women, they say, oh, I feel like I've come home.
Wow. Because
there is this deep sense of intimacy, connection, spirituality, safety. We yearn for that. And I really do have a vision that someday there will be circles everywhere. Anyone who wants a circle will have one. I also teach people, and my book has a lot of exercises for this, how to do what I call heart thinking. What we are taught to do normally is head thinking. And when you're thinking with your head, you disconnect from your heart. And we're very used to that. You know, we go through life thinking, forgetting about our head and body, our heart and body. So we can begin to really start practicing. What is it like when I use my mind not to tyrannize the heart, but in service of the heart? What's it like if I really start listening to what does my heart want? And a practice we often do in my circles is just simply that I have people write a letter from their heart. And it's extraordinary. Our heart, you know, I haven't seen anyone whose heart doesn't have something to say to them. And what the heart says invariably is that what it wants is connection, friendship, beauty. It wants that human realm. It is not interested in just getting a new car or getting the latest gadget. That is not what makes our heart happy. And so I think if we can start really paying more attention to our heart and listening to other people from that place, you know, because one of the things that happens in the circle is there is a quality of listening that many people say they don't experience elsewhere in their life. A lot of times we're listening, but we're already thinking of how we're going to respond. when you really listen to someone, you're not just listening to the words, you're listening through the words to what the soul is trying to express. And when we listen to each other in that way, it's like we're really drawing forth the wisdom in each other. So that is a beautiful gift that we can give to each other. And many of the women that I've trained are using that in business, in schools, in hospitals. There's really no setting where it isn't a tremendous gift to hold that heart space for other people. And you'll be amazed at the way that your relationships start to transform when you do that.
I understand, and I agree with you 100%. However, as I touched on earlier this hour, with all these handheld devices, texting, emails, are we not going to lose that ability to understand and to appreciate the person that is trying to communicate with us? There are times when so many people have misinterpreted the feeling behind the message that it's caused a rift between friends and families. So how do we circumvent technology?
Well, but the technology itself is not the problem. You know, it's in my book. I talk about thought addiction, the way that we are addicted to thinking, and of course, technology taps into that and amplifies it. But this is I'd say it's a transitional phenomenon. First of all, it lies in human nature to want connection. I don't think it will ever go away. So even though there may be one or two generations that are very caught up in this very new technology, I think that our nature will reassert itself, because it's you know, it lies in our nature to want intimacy, to want connection. And so I think we have to see that this is a very, you know, in the bigger picture, this is a very tiny time span. It's like, you know, when the Industrial Revolution happened, the factories were just hellholes.
Yeah.
But then the Industrial Revolution began to evolve, unions began to, you know, things began to change. And so I see the same thing happening, this whole technology. We're finding our way. And so I don't think we're really lost. I think we're just in the beginning of this journey.
Well, you mentioned the Industrial Revolution. You didn't have people leaving the factories with printing presses and weaving looms. You know, we're talking totally different. You know, we're talking apples and walnuts at this point, because kids are being taught to use these instruments in school. We have lost so many employees to ATMs within the banking industry. You bank online. You everything is email. We're turning our world into a digital world instead of a world that is, in my opinion, going to flourish if there was more one-on-one communication. And I don't mean two people in the same room texting each other either.
Yes.
I think this is a very serious problem. Like, you know, I get messages from my youngest daughter, and I don't know what the heck she's trying to tell me. She's texting. You know?
Yes.
So how do you know?
Right.
I understand that in Israel and in Palestine, this may not be the norm as it is here in North America, as well as, you know, Western Europe and Asia. So how do we meld all this so that we can actually learn to communicate, better appreciate what one person is saying, and get past the words, and like you said so beautifully, read the soul.
Well, you know, this whole consumer culture that we live in really wants, I believe that it wants us to be disconnected from our hearts. Because if you are disconnected from your heart, you will have a sense of craving. You know that something is missing. You don't know what it is, but you know something is missing. And so you're the perfect prey for the advertisers to come along and say, well, we know what you need. You need this gadget or this kind of makeup or, you know. So I do think that they want us to be in a state of, I would call it soul starvation. I do think that is one of the main things that feeds the consumer frenzy. If people are satisfied, if they have a well-nurtured heart, they are not addicted to consumption. So what I find is that when you show people another way, and I'm always amazed at how few places there are where people really can find nourishment for their heart. They are far and few between. But when they do, their whole lives begin to change. And, you know, recently a student of mine went into one of the colleges and started doing circles for the students there. And the students said, you know, this is the first time that we are actually talking to each other and discovering who the others are.
Isn't that
We've
amazing?
been sitting in these classes, but we've never connected.
Yeah.
So I think that the more we can offer alternatives, the better. Most people really do not have a lot of alternatives. So a lot of people go to their churches or their religious community hoping to find that, and very often they don't find it. They don't find that true soul nourishment that they are hungry for.
Well, I think the problem with religious philosophies today, whether it's, you know, Catholicism or Protestants or whatever the religion is that the religion has not kept up with the evolution of society. You're trying to feed society using ancient proverbs, ancient mythology, ancient explanations for everything, instead of saying, well, you know what, we've got to revise. We need to come out with a new revision that relates to the society of today. And, you know, I watched Pope Francis while he was in America. And I think that Pope Francis did more for religion in the short period he was in the United States than any other religious leader that I can remember. He brought himself down to the level of everyone by saying, "Pray for me." And if you don't believe in that, wish me well. What a man!
Well, yeah, isn't that beautiful?
It is, and you know, I can see by your book you're following. You know, the idea is very, very, very similar. The circle, bringing everyone down to the same level, so everyone can see, everyone can talk.
Well, and you know. It's very interesting, too, when you look at the very early history of Christianity. Jesus gathered in a circle with his disciples, and all the first congregations always gathered in a circle. And then later it became this hierarchical thing, but that's not how it started. It started as a circle.
Well,
that's what we need to come back to.
Even you know, in the Bible it says, "I am the Alpha, I am the Omega. I am the beginning, I am the end." And the end starts where the beginning ends. A circle. Yes. Jalaja, I want to thank you so much for being with us this hour. It has been most refreshing, I think you're doing one heck of a great job, and I admire you for that.
Thank you so much.
I admire you.
Thank you.
And I would love to have you back on in the future so we can further discuss your philosophy, the change and the difference you're making in the world, as well as to talk about your book that we've been talking about this hour, The Sacred Ego, making peace with ourselves and our world. And let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can get copies of your book.
Yeah, they can get copies on Amazon or at any bookstore. And they can also find out more about workshops and events, book readings, and so on, just by going to sacredego.com.
Jalaja, thank you very much. Wherever you travel, be safe.
Rob.
And blessings to you and yours. Good night now. Exo Nation,
Thank you.
What a great lady.
Pleasure.
I fully enjoyed this conversation. Somebody who wants to make a positive difference in this world. And this is what we need in today's world of uncertainty. Get together. Talk. Communicate. Go past the words and see the heart, the soul of the person, and how they're trying to get that message across to you. Don't forget, Exo Nation. Communication is a two-way street. It consists of talking and listening. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center. He did it to me again. Our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, and we're here with you Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. until midnight. On the X Zone Broadcast Network, Starcom Radio Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. Don't forget you can listen to the X Zone 724-365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. And once again, if you'd like more information on Jalaja Bonheim, or if you'd like to get a copy of her book, visit her online at www.sacredego.com. I'll be back on the other side of this short break with the news. Don't go away.